Today we're going to use the vertex form to graph a quadratic function. Remember that if a quadratic function is in vertex form, you're able to identify the vertex where the line of symmetry will be drawn. F of x is equal to a times the quantity of x minus h squared plus k is vertex form, where h and k form the vertex. We write it as an ordered pair. Remember, if a is positive, then the parabola is going to open up. You get a smile. If the parabola is opening down, that means a is negative, and you get a frown. Now let's look at the first function that we're going to graph today, which is f of x equals negative 3 times the quantity of x minus 2 squared minus 4. We first need to identify the vertex h comma k. So with this vertex, look inside the parentheses and you'll see a minus 2. In the regular form of the vertex, inside the parentheses is a minus sign. And if that's the case, then we know that my h value is going to be positive, so h is 2. On the outside of the parentheses, you'll see a minus 4. But that minus is supposed to be a plus. Well, how did that happen? Well, in order for that to be a minus 4, they had to multiply a negative times a negative to get a positive. So in order for it to be a minus, it had to be a negative times a positive, which means that my k is negative 4. So the vertex of this function is 2, negative 4. The next thing you want to do is you want to identify a. A is the coefficient of the parentheses, which is negative 3. And we're going to use that in a few minutes. Now let's make a table. And in this table, you're going to have some values that will help us to graph this function. The first value is you take your vertex, which is 2, negative 4, and put it in the middle. Now we want to use coordinates to generate 2 more values by using the a equals negative 3. So now we need to put a value above 2, which is 3, and we need a value 1 space below 2, which is 1. Now using our a is negative 3, and since our parabola is 3 units down, that's what the negative 3 means, then we're going to take negative 3 and add to negative 4. That'll give us our coordinate for 3, which is negative 7. And also negative 7 would be the y-coordinate for the point under 2. So now we're going to take those points and we're going to graph them. So you need to graph the vertex to negative 4, 3, negative 7, 1, negative 7, and then connect those 3 points with a smooth curve. Another thing we want to make sure we identify within this parabola is the domain. The domain will be all real numbers, and then we need to figure out what the range is going to be. And since negative 4 is the highest that this parabola is going to get, then we say that all our values for y are going to be less than or equal to negative 4. Now we're going to look at another function. F of x is equal to the quantity of x plus 2 squared minus 1. Here again, you want to identify the vertex. The vertex is in the form of h comma k, where inside the parentheses you'll see a plus 2. That is supposed to be minus 2. So in order for that to be plus, h had to be negative. So h is negative 2. Now we want to look outside the parentheses for our k value. Our k value is being added or subtracted from that quantity. So therefore we see a -1. And it's supposed to be +1. So therefore our k is going to be -1. So we put those two together and we get our vertex, which is -2, -1. Now we need to also identify a. And since there is no number outside of the parentheses, it is understood to be a 1. So you might want to put a 1 there to remind you of that value. So a is equal to 1. We'll use that in a few minutes. So now let's set up a table where our column, the first column is x, and our second column is y, or f of x. Take your vertex and put it in the middle. Now what we need is an x value above 1 unit above -2, which is -1, and we need an x value that is 1 unit below -2, which is -3. Now we have to use our a value. Our a value says that it's +1, which means it's 1 unit up. So therefore, we're going to take that 1 and you're going to add it to -1, the y value of your vertex, and get 0. And we're going to get 0 for the one below also. So now it's time to graph. Take those 3 coordinates and graph your vertex, which is -2, -1. You're going to graph one of the zeros, which is -1, 0, your vertex, and then the other point, -3, 0, and then draw a smooth curve. Notice that the parabola is opening upward. The domain for this parabola is still going to be all real numbers. And since -1, which is my k, is the lowest that graph can be, all values of y have to be greater than or equal to -1. So my range is y greater than or equal to -1. Another function, this time we see a fraction. Don't be afraid, because you can change 1/2 to 0.5, which is the same. So here we have f of x is equal to 1/2 times the quantity of x plus 1 squared plus 5. So here again, the first thing you want to do is identify the vertex h comma k. Inside the parentheses, notice you'll see a +1. If it's plus, then our h is going to be negative. So h is -1. Outside the parentheses, you'll see +5, which is supposed to be. Therefore, k is going to be exactly that number, +5. So the vertex is -1, +5. Now we want to identify a. A is equal to 1/2. But remember, we can change 1/2 to 0.5 and use that as a decimal. Now let's set up our table where the vertex is in the middle. We want an x value 1 unit above -1, which is 0, and 1 unit below -1, which is -2. Now take our a, which is 1/2 or 0.5, and you're going to add 0.5 to 5 to get 5.5 for the coordinates above the vertex and also below the vertex. Now it's time to graph it. You're going to graph the vertex 0, -1, 5. This is the y-intercept 0, 5.5, and then we are going to graph -2, 5.5 and draw a smooth curve. Notice that it is opening upward. The domain will be all real numbers, and the range 5 is the lowest that graph is going to be. So therefore, all values of y have to be greater than or equal to 5. I would like to thank you for listening to this video. Please go back and look at those 3 examples again. Please take note of when my h is negative, when your k is negative, and when both of them are positive, vice versa. And go to Teams and complete the problems that correspond to each one of those. Have a good day.